Hi everybody, Chris Schmidt here with another Grayscale Gorilla tutorial, and we are going to make a nice little field of grass. This tutorial might kind of ramble a little bit because there isn't like a clear final objective for the render, because there's so many different possibilities for what you might be able to do. So why don't we jump right on in. So here we are in Cinema. I think I'm in R14 here, and we're just going to make a default plane, and we're going to base everything off of kind of this generic shape. It's a good kind of generic size for everything. So, what do we have? We have the plane, and then we're going to add a simulation, hair object, add hair, and now we've added hair. If I go in render, you're going to see a whole bunch of brown hair sticking straight up. Not too interesting so far, but let's go and make a couple quick changes so we can kind of start playing around. So, the first thing we're going to do is go to guides. And under guides, there's a couple of key parameters we want to deal with. First of all, length. Length is a big one. I'm going to set it, instead of 100, set it to say about 30. So that's maybe a little longer than generically we might want for some grass, but it's going to work pretty well. Now, hair, between kind of the hair object and the hair shader, there's just a ton of options. So we're going to try and just focus on the really useful ones here. Some fun ones I've been playing around with just to make this tutorial. Now, normally fill hairs work pretty well, but we're not going to use those because those kind of mess up a different technique we're going to use. So we're just going to focus on, to generate more hairs, going to the hairs tab. So going to the hairs tab, we can go and increase this number from, say, 5,000 to 50,000. And another thing I like to do is the segments, kind of slow everything down a little. And I'm going to drop it to 4. And I'm also going to drop the guides segments to 4 because I don't really need more than that for what we're going to be doing. But anyway, we can just go ahead and render now. It's going to take a little bit longer, but you see we have a lot more hairs. It pretty much fills everything in pretty well. So let's see, what's something else we want to do? Well, actually, it might be a little much for right now, so let's go back to hairs and make it 10,000. If I render, it'll render a little faster, and you can see we get some gaps. We're going to do that because we're going to actually, I'm going to go to my content browser, and we're going to go up to maybe, let's see, two things. I'm going to want to go to the texture kit because I just want to pull in a nice ground material. So I'm going to find that under natural, wherever that's hiding. Natural, and then I'm kind of fond of my dirt procedural, so we're going to yank that in. So we got dirt procedural, and then we're also going to go into GSG light kit here, and I'm going to pull in a daylight rig, actually linear daylight rig, I guess is what we want. So linear daylight rig. So I'm going to apply the dirt to the ground. So there's some dirt, and we've got this light going. So it's very orange right now. I think I'm going to click on the color of the light and make it not quite so warm. So I'm going to go ahead and render, and we'll see what we end up with. Now it's going to take a little while longer since we got these lights, but it's worth the extra feedback. So that's working pretty well. The ground's getting lit nicely. But there's something we can do to speed this up, and that's actually, if we go into the guts of this light kit here, we can go into the render dome. And if I click on this, Nick has the lights turned on, the shadow is there. But that's not going to have any effect on what we're doing, so I can actually set that to none, and now there's a lot less shadows being generated. So if I hit render, you see it's calculating a lot faster, and the render should be going a decent amount faster as well. So we don't want to spend a ton of time just watching this thing process over and over again, but we're going to have to spend a little bit of time with that. And listen, we can keep on tweaking this light a little bit. Maybe even make it a little less warm. And we could maybe even set the brightness up a little bit higher. Hit render. Now here's an important detail, and that is, you'll notice that the actual hairs aren't casting any shadow. And the reason they're not casting a shadow, oh, the sun type is also, the sun shadow type is set to area. So we're going to set that to hard. And now that that's set to hard, it might even render a little faster again. It's going to be a little brighter. But what we want to actually do is go to our render settings. So I'm going to pop those open right here. The shortcut is Command B. And here we have our hair renderer, which automatically gets made when we make a hair object. And right here you see reflection, refraction, trace shadows is turned off. If we turn that on and I hit render, what we're going to get now is shadow. Our light is casting shadow. One more thing we want to do in the light kit here in our linear daylight is go into the light, and we're going to go to our shadow, and we're going to make the density not quite 100. I'm going to drop it to say 75%. So we get some shadow, but it's not, 100% shadow. I don't see. I think it'll look a little better if we're kind of viewing it from maybe, say, this angle. Kind of the same angle we're seeing the sun from. The sun's a little bit more over to the right, but now the shadow's going to be casting left. And I just think that's a kind of a nice angle to be working from. All right, so there's some super duper basics. So why don't we get a little bit more fun here? First of all, this looks terrible. It's brown. It doesn't look anything like grass. So why don't we start by making it grass colored? And the best way to make it grass colored, I've always found, is if you kind of do a quick Google image search for the object you're working with. And I just like doing this for color sampling. So here's kind of an image I like for the lawn. It's kind of a nice generic color. We get a little bit darker color here where there might be a shadow and some lighter colors. We kind of get the whole range here. So I can tab back over to Cinema. Actually, this might be a little tougher. I'll have to pull it off the side a little bit. And I can click on this tab, double click it, and I turned on in my preferences the Mac color selection. So I can really easily grab my color picker. And I'm going to just try and find a nice middle green here. So I think that's a nice middle green. So that might be kind of hard to manually pick right there. So I think that usually works pretty well. So now we've got that, we'll maximize again. And let's see another, well, let's render. So, okay, excellent, it's green. That's a good start. So it's green, but another really important aspect here is the specular. And I've been playing a bunch with this, and I found that a kind of a sharp specular, maybe say 75, works really well. But I like pulling the strength back to something not quite so strong, maybe like 35. So, oh, and I also like making it kind of a green color. So I guess we might want to pull Cinema off the side again, and I'm going to grab my specular color, and I'm actually going to pull one of these highlighted areas. Actually, that's probably not grass, but we can go to maybe a nice brighter area, one of the brightest areas of grass. And now the highlight won't be white, it'll be this kind of green color. And now that that's up, we might even be able to make the brightness a little bit stronger. Okay, so that's good. There's the beginnings of that. Now if I hit render, it's not going to look terribly different, but now we've got a different specular color. And we still don't have a ton. We dropped the hair count down again. And honestly, for this version of grass, this might be this might be a little bit long. So we're going to play with some different variations. So we're going to go and maybe go to our hair. So I click on the hair object and go increase my count by, change it from 10,000 to 5,000. And the height's a little high. So we'll go to the guides and maybe set the length to 15. So it's not quite as tall, about half the height, or exactly half the height. Render, and now we got a lot more hairs, we got a lot more grass, and they're a lot shorter, so that's all good. But right now they're all doing the exact same thing, and that's really boring. And the specular might be a little bit high, but it's hard to tell when they're all sticking straight up. The easiest way to make them not stick straight up is Frizz. Frizz is my favorite one of these settings here. And we're just going to turn that on. We're not even going to change any settings yet. And let's just go ahead and hit render, and let's see what we get. There we go. Some nice frizzy random grass. Grass doesn't stick straight up. So now that's randomly going all over the place. It looks pretty good. The highlight seems a little bright, but of course the highlights are dependent on the angle that we're viewing it at. So if we were to rotate around, especially the opposite side, we wouldn't be catching hardly any highlights whatsoever. But I'd say maybe our base grass is a little bright. So I can go over here and maybe just pull the darkness down a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. Render again. If it's still too bright, then we'll go to our specular. And keep in mind, don't follow my settings exactly. I'm making these up for whatever I think looks good. And whatever type of lawn you're going for, whatever type of grass you're trying to set up, it might be completely different. Now, already that being a little darker is helping quite a bit. I still think going to specular, maybe dropping this down to 40. Oh, and our secondary one, I usually just turn that off. Just because of we don't need the added complexity of trying to deal with that. So that's what we get now. So now it's a little bit darker overall, and I think that's working pretty well. Let's go to our thickness now. If we go to our thickness, the number, what I like doing is this is the root, so the base, and then you get the tip. So it's fading from 1 to 0.1. But what I like doing is setting both of these numbers to the same amount, say 0.5, 0.5 is what I've been liking. And now you can just remap it with this curve. So imagine this is a sideways blade of grass. So if I wanted to go from full size to a point, I can just drag that down, and now it's transitioning from the base to the top. And now if I render, let's see what we get. Sorry, we have all this little processing time for here. But now you see these hairs start out thick, and then they get nice and thin on the top. And as an alternative, if you wanted it to maybe look like cut grass, like it had been recently chopped, if you pull it up to the top, then it's going to maintain the thickness all the way through to the top. And now you see these are much fatter overall, and the top should pretty much just terminate. I think they round a little bit, but it pretty much just looks like they terminated. So if this is supposed to be a cut grass, you kind of want the thickness to be maintained all the way through, or maybe just pull it down a little bit. But let's see, I'll pull it down just a little bit so we'll act as if it was cut. And that's looking pretty good. Now, something else I like to actually, so we're going to be jumping around quite a bit because there's just a lot of details and there isn't a right way to do this. So let's close down the hair. I'm actually going to move it to the left so it's easiest to grab. And let's go to the hair object over here and play with a couple other things. Some things I discovered and they're really nice and really fun. And that is, let's say we got this whole plane here, but we don't want to grow the grass on the entire thing. And then, you know, of course, you can use the hair object and paint in guides in particular places. But that can be a pain. What I like doing is working with materials. So what happens is if we go to the hair tab, we can go to growth. And under growth, there's a density textured thing. So what we can do here is drop in some sort of material. And what I'm going to drop in is a gradient. And we got a gradient. I'm going to click on, well, actually, we just got this gradient. So let's go ahead and just hit render. So we got density and we've got this gradient, default stuff. So we hit render, it processes for a second and let it render. And let's see if we can even see anything. Okay, yeah, so the gradient is starting here. So it's the thickest here and should be in theory fading out to nothing over here. But I kind of have problems with this. Like, it's probably working correctly. There's just so many hairs that thinner hairs don't look terribly different. But here's my problem with it is, well, it just doesn't behave the way I want it to. So here's what my workaround has kind of turned into. And that is, I'm going to change, first of all, my gradient to circular instead of linear. And let's just make a really tight circle here. And actually what I'm going to do is I know white is where hair is and black is where there isn't any. So now that we've done that, I can go ahead and hit render. And it's going to take a second to process, of course. But then you're going to see that we get a nice, tight, perfect circle of hair and then none on the outside. We are now using this texture to control where the hair is being placed. Now keep in mind this is linked to the object, so if I were to take my object and stretch it out over here, it's going to pull the hair that way. If I stretch out the other way, it's going to kind of turn the circle into an oval. It's as if it was mapped UVW. It is mapped UVW to this object. So let's see, some other interesting important things. We're going to be jumping back and forth. I'm going to go to editor, and right now the editor is displaying our guidelines, but we can actually change that to show our hairlines. Now, depending on how many hairs, that could get dangerous, but what's great about turning on hairlines is we're now seeing every actual hair. Actually, we're not seeing all of them. This detail is how many we're seeing. So 25% of the hairs, so a fourth of them, but it's giving us real-time feedback on how the frizz is working and where they are placed. So this is a wonderful addition. If you get too many hairs, this might run slow, and you have to drop the detail down lower. But for right now, this is working exactly the way I want it to. Now, like I was saying before, I kind of want this to be a fall off. Let's say I want this to be a circular fall off. But the way it kind of naturally falls off, it doesn't behave the way I would expect it to. So what I like doing is kind of working with a straight black and white image. This is pretty much black and white. We could set it to none, but there's no reason to. The difference is minuscule. But what we can do is use displacement to kind of make a black and white based fall off where there isn't kind of shades of gray. And let me just show you what I'm talking about. So if I click a little drop down here and I go to, I think effects, is it effects? Yeah, distorter. So I'm going to distort the gradient. So what happens when I made that is it automatically made the distorter and put the gradient inside of it. So now what we have is a distorter, and here's our base object. So now I can put a noise in here. As soon as I put a noise, you see that this is getting distorted. Now there's a bunch of little settings we can change here that do really cool things. First of all, I don't want it to wrap around. If it goes too far, I don't want it to start. If it goes too far left, I don't want it to come back on the right. So we're going to change that to none. That's not going to cycle around. But right now it's set to directional, so you see it's pushing it off to the top left. If we set this to field flow, it's just my particular favorite, you see it stays centered and kind of displaces everywhere. So here's what's going to happen. If I start increasing the amount, say 500, see how it starts displacing based on this noise, but it's still pretty much a black and white image. And if I were to, actually, it doesn't refresh too well. In real time to refresh it, I think we had to do something like change a hair count. As soon as we do, boom, we get the refresh here. And now you see how it's changed. But what's cool, well, there's a lot of things cool here, but we can go in here and keep on messing with it. First of all, we probably got to make the circle smaller because we're distorting it and it's going way to the edges. So it's a really tiny circle. And once again, if we want to refresh, we just change a hair and boom, now it's distorted. And you see, it's actually pretty accurate to what this image is showing. I'm not sure if it's 100% accurate, but that is really close to this. So you get a bunch of clumps in the middle and they kind of fade off to the side. But if we go into our distorter, excuse me, and we got our noise size here, what I can do is shrink the global scale of this noise to a smaller size. And of course you gotta do the refresh. I wonder if turning on the hair on and off. Nope, doesn't do it. We gotta do a kind of a bigger refresh. I wonder if there's a good way of doing that. I changed the hair, and now boom, it changes. And actually the distorter is so strong now, you see it's just a bunch of dots. I should have checked that. But let's go to a smaller number here. You see if we go to like 200, you see how our perfect little circle is getting distorted to this. And we go to say 300. It's a whole bunch of dots, maybe a little too much. And I guess I could make the circle a little bigger based on this one. But you see how we're kind of getting like solid white and it's fading out based on these dots to black. And I like that a lot. We can do another quick little tweak here, have it refresh. Bink, and now you see how it's fading out what I would consider a little bit more visually naturally. I'm sure the way it's programmed actually does it a little more accurately. You get the levels here in theory, this is kind of subdividing different levels. You can set up really high like 100. But in our setup, that's really going to have no difference because we're just working with black and white. But I found that that still didn't fade the way I wanted it to. So anyway, we're controlling this kind of just through textures, through the distorter. We can go to our gradient and change this to things like, you know, we could go back to linear and second refresh. No, I wish it did, but we can do a refresh and see how it kind of fades really nicely there. I just kind of wanted to do that as a, I'm gonna hit undo because I want to keep my circle. Hit undo a few times. All right, so we get to keep our circle and render. And let's see how that looks. Keep in mind there's 25% of them, so there's actually going to be more. And let's see, that looks pretty good. So let's see, I can go my daylight. It's blown out a little bit actually. I know I made it brighter, but let's make it darker. I don't like how bright my dirt is getting. And we can always pull a specular back on the dirt. Keep in mind, be it a tutorial or one of our products or anything, it's never in its final state. Always change everything. So now you see we got some nice fuzzy grass. It looks really soft, like something you might want to lay down on. Kind of you know, well, you see that there's a little bit of a contradiction here. We're just kind of in the dirt field, a little patch of grass. So it's obviously not somebody's lawn, but it looks nice and manicured, nice and soft. So I guess we just have to decide what kind of grass we're going for here. So why don't we go to our hair, and I'm just going to... we got this distorter here. What's the best way of getting rid of this? I don't want to lose it entirely because we'll play around with it again. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to make a layer shader, which won't change anything. But now I can go inside the layer shader, and I'm just going to make a color, which makes it all white, which will just fill it all in. So later on, I can turn that off, and we'll get all of our cool detail back. So now it's just a big field of grass. If I were to render, then it's going to like nice and soft like it did before. And just fewer hairs because... it still was making 50,000 hairs just in that little cluster, so maybe now it's not quite as soft. We'd have to maybe make 4 times as many hairs to fill it in the exact same way. But that still looks pretty nice. I like it. So we got our nice manicured lawn here. So what are some important details or other things we can do? Well, we can go into, say, our color channel. And something I like doing is, right now it's all perfect. If we go back to our kind of reference image, you see that this is like there's a dark patch and lighter patches and... you know, maybe a little bit of its shadow, maybe some of it's where clouds overhead. But in general, I think grass just isn't the same perfect color everywhere. So what I like doing is going to this little texture drop down and dropping in a noise. And you actually have to make these huge because kind of this global space. So I can actually make it 10,000, which I still don't think is quite high enough. If I go and render, it should override the color entirely. And you'll see when I render, like we're still not really seeing the patchiness that I want to. I'm going to crank the contrast way up. In fact, we can go black and white. And now when I hit render, hopefully we'll see it. That even 10,000 isn't going to be enough. But we might see little black and white patches. Is that set to average? No, it's set to normal. Well, let's see. I'm just going to add another 0. So it's 100,000 and hit render. Let's see what happens. Be seeing something. Maybe it's working. Maybe I have to go even bigger. I'm going to add a 5 in here. Maybe we'll finally see it. 500,000. This is why I say, kids, always when you're messing with this stuff, change it by orders of magnitude. Still feel like I'm not seeing the difference. Either I'm screwing something up here. Noise. It seems to be the way I would want it to be. Noise. Big. Huge. Don't tell me I have to add another 0 in there. 5,000,000%. That's way too big. It's got to be too much. Yeah, I'm screwing something up. I don't know what it is. It's too big. 5,000. That should have been... Set the texture. Maybe I want to set this to world? Is that what I'm screwing up? Set that to world and set it back to 50,000? Well, sorry about that little mix-up. Thought I had that bit figured out. I don't even know where to go from there. I'm all discombobulated now. That's dirty looking grass now. Don't want to do that. Set the normal. I mean, normally what I do is set this to overlay. And we got the really strong black and white. So it should be about 50-50. And that should kind of be making certain patches lighter, certain patches darker. Let me go check my file. Kind of screwed it up already. Let's go to noise. Yeah, let's see. We got 100,000 FBM, 100,000 in the color channel. I'm gonna copy that. Let's go back to our new file. I'm just gonna paste this channel, see what happens. Set to overlay and go back to normal, which should completely take it over. And let's just see what we see. Well, that seems a little more white. I'm going to turn off spec. I'm actually going to turn off frizz. So that's really, really straightforward. Sorry, you get to see me troubleshoot for a second. This is a really cool control, so I really want to get it right. Black to white. I'm going to crank the contrast. Now you're seeing black and white. It's all black. So is that too big? I'm going to kill it. 10. Now we're at 10,000. Pardon me. Aw, man. This was going so well, too. Oh, look, there's a little bit there. Why is it behaving so strange? Dude, okay, that is behaving the way it should be, but there's only the tiniest patches of white. This FDM set to all these settings. Contrast is correct. Alright, well, I'm glad we had a solution. I'm going to pull the brightness up a little. Now you're kind of seeing this pull in. And, yeah, seriously, I don't know why it was behaving that way. So now you see we're getting the black and white, which is supposed to just be a clear example of kind of what's being affected. So now I can go to a different type of noise like Luca. And I'm not sure if that's going to blow out. I guess we can kind of scale until we see a little bit here. But you might not see in this because the noise is so large. So that's the brightness. I actually want to pull the contrast back because I don't want the contrast to be quite that high. I want it to be big, but I don't want it to be that big. I want to see darker and lighter patches as we go. So this is a little more. You see how it's lighter here and darker here. It's actually still a little bit large, so why don't we set this to 5,000 and render, and I think we might be getting a little bit more in the ballpark. I'm just, sorry, I'm still not entirely sure what was going on there. So there, now we're getting a little bit more of what I want. So you see we got a light patch, light patch, a little more dark. So it's kind of just random around here. That's exactly what I want. So now that we've got that, I can set this blend mode to overlay. And now that that's set to overlay, it's probably a little strong. So let's pull this back a little. But the basic idea is now we get our green color, but the overlay is going to be making certain parts lighter, certain parts darker. Not a lot, but enough to start adding some variation here. And that visual variation is very important. So it doesn't look like this perfect field anymore. You get these darker areas and some lighter areas. So that's exactly what I wanted. Now that that's working, we can go and turn our frizz back on, which will make it nice and frizzy. And now we're ready to rock again. So turn the frizz back on. Actually, we turn the specular back on. And now when we render, we should be starting to get something looking pretty nice. There we go. I like that. Slightly darker, slightly lighter. Excellent. Now, some other really cool details. So, there's our field of grass. Actually, I'm going to take a quick screenshot of that because you might use that somewhere in the tutorial. And now, let's see. I'm going to turn off our frizz and we're going to turn on, I think, curl is what I liked. And what we're going to do with curl, and you can see a little feedback here, is we're going to make it look like it's mowed grass, where it's kind of half of it goes one way and the other half goes the other way. When you mow grass, you see, you get those really nice baseball diamond type lines. Let's try and emulate that. So we're in curl, and right now the direction is set to hair, but I'm actually going to set it to, I think world will work. And then we get the axis, but we don't want axis, we want texture. Everything's texture with me. So we're going to go texture, and now there's no texture, but what we're going to make actually is another gradient. And we're going to go gradient. I'm actually going to set it to V. And what I'm going to do is set this to none. And now we get this hard line. And now, cool thing you do is right click on the gradient, and I can say double knots, and now we've doubled the knots. The problem is that we get this black right here. I'm going to yank that away, and now you see we get our black to white, and we actually yank that away. But now what happens is we can right-click again, double knots, and you see we get more stripes. I can right-click again, boom, and we can just keep doubling, and then we got, I think, 8 stripes there. All good. And now if we look here, you can see that these are behaving a little differently. You can kind of see these rows a little bit. But here's something really interesting, and I didn't know this, and that's why it's really important to look into this kind of thing, is if you right-click on kind of this thing here, I can right-click on Show Help, and I found out here that this kind of works like a normal map. And this isn't based on black and white, it's based on these colors. And you can see here they kind of give you an example of what direction these things rotate depending on what color you have. And you can see that when you have this yellow, it's going to the left, and when you have this blue, it goes to the right. And that's actually what we want. So I'm just going to take this gradient, and I'm going to throw it into a colorizer. And inside the colorizer, I can go inside here, yank out this middle dot, don't need it. And now I can grab this one, and I'm going to just grab what they have in the help. And then I got to move this a little bit, maybe over here. And I can grab this yellow one here, and I can grab this blue. And now we have recolored our stripes to these colors. And now we have exactly what they have in the help. And now you see that the grass should be, I do believe, we got the colorizer based on texture, going from one direction to the other. So now, and our curl might be a little strong, so let me actually de-curl that a little bit. 30 degrees would probably be more than enough. Now you can see these strands are going one way and the opposite strands are going the other. It's probably really strong. We go to advance, and this is kind of where it's getting applied. I can say apply more overall. Yeah, we'll just do overall. And it's still a lot. I'm going to drop it to 20. And now something that's really cool is we haven't done anything except change the direction that they're tilting. But watch what happens when I render. When I render, we should very, very clearly see the direction that they're facing, and it's primarily because of where the specular is catching. Because certain hairs are tilting one way, and other hairs are tilting a different direction. We very clearly see these lines. So, obviously, this is a little too strong, but the easy way to fix that is let's turn our frizz back on. As soon as we turn our frizz back on, now they're kind of bending that way, and they're kind of bending the other way, but when we render, those bends still happen, but now there's variation in it. So it's going to be a lot harder to tell, and let's just wait for this to finish rendering, and we can kind of see. And actually, this is, once again, a judgment call you have to make depending on what you're doing. Like, how long ago was this grass supposed to have been mowed? Because now you can see, like, okay, there's definitely a little bit of a stripe here and a little bit of a stripe there, but they're not super strong. So you could pull your frizz back a little bit. You could... we could pull our frizz back to say 30, but maybe that bends a little strong. So go to the curl and make that go to 10. Oop, not 120, geez. So now it should be bending a little one way, a little the other way, but the frizz isn't going to be as strong. And also the angle is super dependent, so why don't we just rotate the camera a little, maybe get a different idea of what it's doing. Give it a second. There we go, that looks pretty good. That might be getting a little closer to a nice fresh cut lawn. Of course, depending on the angle, it's going to catch really high, and your specular has a lot to do with what this is going to look like. But what's great is, like, well, first of all, you can just easily push and pull these different settings. And let's see, like, this looks pretty good, but you know what, this is going to look even better with more hair. I'm tending to keep these numbers down because I want to render quickly for you guys. But I'm going to make it 20,000, or is that 200,000? 200,000. Now you see that we're going to get a lot more hairs in the feedback. I might want to decrease the detail setting in hair, but let's not worry about that. Let me just talk through while this renders a much higher number of hairs, but I want to see how it looks nice and shaggy and soft. Let's see, what is there to talk about? I don't know. Well, there, it's done rendering anyway. But now that there's more hairs, we haven't done anything except add more hairs, and you can kind of clearly see how these are leaning one way and these are leaning the other way. And, like, nice and soft, nice kind of lawn looking thing. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. Now, hair does take a while to render. There's no getting around that. And I'm going to drop this number back down again. What was it? Wasn't. Oh, 50,000. Yeah, we'll drop back down to 50,000. I was talking about a couple other little things. If we go to the color channel, we got this variation tab here, which is pretty useful. We can do variation in hue, and let me tell you, you want to use a light touch here, because if you set it to even something light, like 15 doesn't seem like very much. But when I go in render, you're going to see that we actually have a ton of variation in the color of these. Some of them are going full yellow, and a lot of them are going kind of into blue, so that's far too much. Just for my purposes, I tend to keep the hue down in like the 2 or 3% range. Saturation, I don't play too much. You don't see saturation doing a lot. It'll decrease the color or make it more saturated. Here's V for value. I like that one. I can usually put a little bit more in there. So it's going to make them a little bit more white, a little bit darker. It tends not to stand out too much, so I like it for the variation. Once again, I like breakup. I like it not looking repeating. And that's something that's great about hair, is how it doesn't really look like it's repeating. And I like the way that's looking. Once again, it would be great if there was more hairs, but I want the render time to be fast. So there's that. And let's do just a few more things. Well, I mean, I'm just talking, and hopefully you guys are learning a little bit about hair and trying to make grass out of it. So there's no proper ending to this. But let's turn off curl. So essentially we're turning off the mode look. And let's play with scale. There's length and scale, and they're very different. What scale does is it kind of grows whatever we have bigger. But length kind of chops it off. So it's as if it really was mode. But let's play with scale. And scale, let's go and make a noise. And by putting a noise in here, we can kind of make certain clumps grow more than others. Now, our grass isn't very tall right now, so that's maybe going to screw it up a little. So I'm actually going to go to the hair, go to my guides, and I'm going to set the length up to 30. So now all of it's going to be growing, well, twice as tall. But now we can go into the noise, and we can do something like do some low clip here. And now you can see how a bunch of these are completely disappearing. But what we could do is kind of say, these are the clumps that we want to be longer. So it's kind of like it's a lawn that wasn't mowed in a while. So these are little clumps that grow higher. But what we can do is black is erasing it entirely. So what we'd say is like, black, we don't want it to be black. That gets rid of it. So let's make it 50% gray. Now, because we made it twice as long, 50% gray will put it back to the height it used to be. And these long ones will be even longer. So anything that's white is going to be, well, white will be twice as long as the other ones. So now that we've turned off the kind of the mode look from curl and we've added the scale, what we're getting is maybe a little bit more unruly grass. Maybe your neighbor needs to go cut it now, and you need to give him a call and say, hey Larry, your grass looks like it's getting a little long over there. You mind cutting it? Let's go to the hair and maybe even make it longer. Let's go 45. Let's go nuts. And now that's even longer, so maybe we should pull this a little darker again. So we start getting a little bit more contrast between the long ones and the short ones. Once again, there is no perfect solution here. There we go. Now it's starting to get a little wild. You know how there's little clumps of grass that don't quite grow the same speed as the other ones. And this noise is working well, but we could go to something. I just accidentally clicked on a hammer, but that's working pretty well. We can increase this white a little bit. Now you see we get these little clusters a little bit better. And you've probably seen lawns where it seems like little clumps of grass seem to grow a little taller than the rest of them. It's like the crabgrass growing faster. So now we're getting kind of a more wild field. And, that looks pretty good. Why don't we take another quick screenshot of that? I like it. And let's see. Well, I like that a lot. What are some other things to tinker around with? Well, why don't we try some different type plants? If we go to our hair, we can actually go back to our the hair and go to the hairs tab, go inside this layer that we have, and the color's overriding the circle. But if we were to get rid of that, it should, well, if it refreshed, those would all disappear. I wonder if moving a frame forward. Oh yeah, okay, refreshing the frame. So hitting G to frame forward and back again refreshes it. So that's a good way of doing it. You see we just get the circle, but you know what, instead of that, why don't we just make a new noise? And I'm going to frame forward, frame back, and let's see what we get. Now you see we kind of get these little clumps, so let's go inside here into our noise and maybe try, let's see, I want to see this a little better. If we do this little drop down, we get our little preview window. And let's see, Dense. Dense works pretty good. With dense, if we kind of crank up this contrast a little bit, see we kind of get these little clumps. If I frame forward, frame back, now you see we start getting these really nice clumps of grass like this. And now what we can do is go to our hairs and make it way longer. Let's say 75. Now these are going to start getting taller. And we can even go to our color. Instead of it being a nice kind of green grass, we can start going a little bit more into the golden area. And maybe start making like some wheat or wild or dried grass in this kind of dirt field. So we can go ahead and hit render. And now you see we get nice clumps. At the specular is probably a little high here, and I could probably make this darker. Let's do that. A little saturated, a little too dark. Maybe even go a little bit more in the brown range. So you get some kind of brown grass. And we get these nice little clusters of it. There we go. So just by changing a couple little settings, you see how we're completely changing the way the scene works. So that's looking pretty cool. Why don't we go back to the hair here and let's say we want even less. I'll go to the noise, maybe pull this up so we get smaller clusters of white. Frame forward, frame back, refresh it. Big, tiny little clusters now. And here, why don't we make it even longer? We'll set the length. And actually, we still have the length being set by our scale in here. Actually, turn that off and you see they all get pretty long. Super long, actually. Yeah, why don't we do that? We'll just turn the scale off there, which is fine. And now we can maybe pull this back a little. Go into our hair, go to guides, pull this back to maybe 50, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a little better. And now something I discovered is kind of cool. If I render, just for comparison, we get these kind of clusters. You can see right here clearly in the feedback that they're kind of like little clusters that are fading out. So it might make for kind of a nice plant little, I'm not sure what type of plant that would be, but that's working pretty well. But you know, there's things that aren't perfect about it. I'll just let it render so I can take a quick screenshot. look funny. Little like broom heads. But we can go over here and we got the scale. But we can go to scale and just put in a regular noise, and now it's going to be. Actually, we can't. We got it clear, and then put in the noise. I'll reset it. And now, even maybe crank the contrast a little bit. And now what should be happening is like we're gonna get bigger and smaller clusters. So they're not all exactly the same. And we can actually make this smaller if we went to global scale like 10%. Kind of each individual plant might have smaller and larger ones. Let's set to 25. Let's see what happens. There. That's pretty good. Now each one has variation, but they're still kind of bigger and smaller clumps. So that's all good. But, you know, other things you do is like go to the thickness, and I can set the thickness up to be a thicker type of plant. And here's something that's kind of cool. Let's say this is a proper type of wheat or something. Sorry. Like a wild grass. What we can do is make it a really thin branch, and then up here it can kind of shoot up really tall. And I'll render that. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. So that's rendering, and now what's going to happen is this should be thinner, and you kind of get this top, this head on it that's a little bit thicker. It's not perfect, but it's kind of cool for how quick it renders and how quick it is to set up. Let's see. Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to do. Well, first of all, oh geez, sorry. Coughing fit all of a sudden. We'll maybe pull that up a little. Oh, we still got this green. Let's make it a little more golden, maybe a little brighter even. But the main thing I want to show you is if we go to Frizz, I found this by accident. If you go to Frizz, right now it kind of starts out with nothing and it kind of tapers out. What's cool is if we actually pull this down and pull the beginning up, what happens is it tapers out in the beginning and then straightens out. So what I kind of like is putting it in the middle to kind of make this U shape. So what happens is it tapers out in the beginning and then straightens out and then gets frizzy at the top again. We don't even have to pull it out of the way. Maybe pull it down a little bit more. And now when we render, we have a completely different vibe. It feels like a completely different plant. Different type of grass growing here. Just by changing that curve. It's crazy how quickly, how different you can make these scenes feel just with a couple little clicks. Let me rotate a little bit there. Go to color. A little more variation in the hue, maybe 20%. Maybe even, no, not the hue. We'll make it the hue 4, value 20. Scale's pretty good. I mean, just tons and tons and tons of settings. Hit render. Let's see what we get. But yeah, I mean, the bigger point is just play, see what you end up with. It's really fun. There is no right or wrong way to do it. Big old clusters of wheat or something now. Let's see, and just maybe for one final... Well, do we want to go to the pretty render? Yeah, why not? We can turn this... we kind of screwed everything up. Kind of wanted to go back and make the grass look all pretty. I guess we can. Best way will be go back here and do a color picker again real quick. Can have a nice middle green. There we go. And now we got the overlay. Everything's probably set up pretty well. We'll go to this material here. Scale's maybe a little high. And we don't want the curl. But our thickness is all screwed up. So why don't we just go here, right click, and I can say reset the default. And then we can pull it down a little bit so it tapers. And we kind of got our wild grass going again. We go back to our hair. And I go back to my hairs, go in here. Now I kind of like that we get these extra clusters. So what I'm going to do is actually, we got the noise here, so I'm actually going to pull this back so there's wider clusters, but the whole thing should fill in pretty well. I'm going to hit G and F to rewind and go forward. I actually pull this up a little more. Let's see what happens. We should get taller clusters. Refresh. Forward. There. Now you see we get taller clusters and shorter ones. I have to push the contrast up a little bit there. It should be pretty tall. So nice wild grass kind of thing going on. We can go back in here into our Frizz and we'll reset that too. Right click and say reset the default. Get the regular Frizz going. Very nice. And now just for the, kind of a pretty final render, we can go to our plane here and I want to deform it so it's kind of a nice circle. So I'm going to make an FFD. We'll drop that in the plane. I'm going to make it 400, 400, maybe 10. I'm going to drop my Y to 3 and put my grid up to 4, 4. In fact, we can even turn our hair off so we get the feedback a little faster. What I'm going to do is maybe just grab these corners. And now I can pull it down. And it's going to round it out a little bit. But now I'm going to grab these other edges. And now when I pull that down, we're going to get a nice rounded top. It's a nice rounded hill. And I turn the hair back on. You see we're going to have perfect hair still up there. Working great. I don't like seeing the FFD, so I'll turn that off. And I totally didn't even realize this, but it's pretty awesome. If you go to the content browser and we go up to presets, I guess, I used to just I just always noticed broadcast. But you can go to visualize, and inside visualize is objects. And inside objects is something. Plants. And inside plants is a whole bunch of freaking plants. So cool. And we got something like the bonsai pine. I want a bonsai pine, so I'm going to double click that. Now we got in the scene. We got this perfect little tree there. So we got our tree in the field of grass. I can maybe set this corner up a little bit. We can go to our daylight rig here and get some sunset colors going. I've actually got it up already. And scoot it off to the side, and we can go and grab our cinema, pull it off to the side a little. Actually, we need to see this. So I'm actually going to pop this out. Hit this little plus here. We pop out this menu just so we can go off the side. Usually I have 2 monitors, and this isn't a problem. But, yeah, we can grab some nice sunset colors here. Maybe a little bit of this warm orange. And this will fade to these darker, super dark colors here. And then we got this, well, that goes all the way to dark blue, but we need to get this lighter blue. Nice. Alright, that should about do that. I'm going to scale this up. And now all we have to do is maybe pull these around until we kind of see them where we want them. There, we get the blue coming in. Maybe get some this darker blue up top. Get this vibrant orange pulling in the bottom. I'm going to keep pulling it up until we start seeing it. It's way down there. There it is. So we kind of get some sunset stuff going. And now we got that. So I can go to my sun. Maybe let's make it way warmer like it was originally. And I think a little brighter. Let's do a quick render and see what that looks like. Let's see. Well, we gotta make some changes here for sure. First of all, I'm gonna, oh dear, I'm gonna undo my view. I'm gonna rotate a little bit this way, so we get the sun kind of behind us. And I'm gonna go into my grass, and my hue is bugging me now, so I'm gonna drop it back down to 2. And I'm gonna go scale, and we get our random scale going here. I definitely want that, so we get longer and taller grass. And obviously this plant needs to come down, so we're gonna drop it down until it's intersecting the ground a little bit. And we can kind of frame our camera a little bit better, maybe get off the side, because nobody likes a perfectly centered image. Hit render again. Let's just see what we end up with here. Well, that's pretty good, but this grass is, I mean, we're just making a pretty image at this point, so drop the length down. We'll probably want some more, but it just seems like it's not frizzy higher. Make more frizz. We got the scale going. Thickness is, well, it's wild grass, so I don't mind it being a little thicker. Scale is totally random. 50, make it bigger a little. Get these clusters going, hit random. We're rendering here. Tree looks pretty nice. I mean, it's not perfect. The grass is being a little weird. The specular lost its greenness, so we can add the green back in. Let's see how big of a difference that was making. I'm always curious how much specular changes an object, because it's usually pretty crazy. Well, I guess not a ton. This does have a lot of specular, so maybe pull that back. I feel like it's blowing out a little. The tree looks nice, but the grass is a little bright. Yeah, that's pretty good. The frizz is working nicely. Maybe we could even make the grass maybe a little more yellow. It's wild. Render again. Oh, wow, just a little change, huge difference. Lost all that green. Yeah, pretty happy with that. I mean, we could keep tweaking and tweaking all day long, and it would never end. Daylight 150. Pull the brightness back. Go to the hair. I don't know. Maybe we can even pull in this little circular thing a little bit, so we should get the grass a little taller in the center. Maybe we'll see some dirt through here. Just a little bit. I don't want to see a ton, but maybe a little. Yeah, it's poking through a little bit. Nice grassy field. I mean, so many things to control. It's actually kind of overwhelming. We make the grass shorter, and now hit render, and let's just see how different that looks. Actually, I kind of like that better already. Yeah. I'm gonna call it a day right there. Okay, well, that was making a bunch of different kinds of grass with hair. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned some techniques. I'd love to see what you make. Go ahead and post in the comments. I am by no means an expert. A lot of this I had to reteach myself today because I just kind of felt like making 3D grass. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'll see you next time. Bye.